I want to get some more background, so I do a little investigation myself, because nobody seems to have the knowledge to fix the problem. So I started to search the internet, and I looked at the documentations for these AFCI breakers. I looked at some more troubleshooting guides, and I realized Eaton had a troubleshooting telephone number.
About a year ago, I got a call from a homeowner who was not satisfied with the functioning of his arc fault breakers that were installed in his home. He and I went through the scenarios that he was experiencing.
Because what I had done is I journaled every day what was causing the problem, what switch was turning on when this AFCI breaker would trip.
I tried to identify, first we went through a grounded neutral or shared neutral situation.
And he said, "Have you checked all the wires?" And I said, "Well, I've had the wires checked." He said, "You know, maybe you can, are you comfortable checking the wires?" I said, "I'm comfortable checking the wires." That's fine, because I did had electrical experience in my background. So I pulled out all of the switches and all of the receptacles, and I checked every wire to make sure they weren't skinned, to make sure they weren't touching anywhere.
So he called me back and let me know that he was still experiencing nuisance tripping. So he took it one step further, and I sent him a breaker, and I asked him to return the breaker that he was experiencing the tripping in.
He asked me to send the breaker back to them because they could find out what it is. That's the source of the trip. So he calls me back and says, they received the breaker, and you have a ground fault error. It's tripped because of a ground fault.
I told him there's a simple way of disconnecting the load wires from the breaker and taking a handheld meter and try to read conductivity between the neutral and the ground bar in his panel. And he did that, and he recognized that there was a leakage, a ground leakage.
So we found that determined that the resistance was found isolated between the panel and the first switch of the home run, which happened to be one switch that was never tested because it was in the back closet. And so the problem is that wire's in the wall, and now it has to be investigated by an electrician. So I called back the second electrician who actually tested the wires in the first place.
So I came back and wanted to narrow down where the problem is exactly. So I started back over here in this area where the circuit comes into. I located it where the circuit came from the panel straight to this closet switch here. I disconnected everything from this point on and realized that there was nothing wrong with all the wiring this way, and there's a problem with the wire going back to the panel.
And he went up to trace how the wires came in and where they went down, and he climbed into the attic, and then he yelled down, "I think I found the problem."
And I actually found a little nick right in the wire right above the top wall plate there.
There was a truss plate in the attic that the initial electrician, whoever wired the home, had drilled through. So when they drilled through, it tore up all the metal. And the guy, whoever wired the home, pulled the wire through the ripped up truss plate.
There was a piece of jagged metal that the wire was touching into, creating a little neutral to ground short.
As he's coming down, after he silicones the hole, and he's coming out of my attic, he says, "Hey, you have a gas leak up here."
Not only, maybe about 10 feet away, is the gas air handler unit up there. And when I was going back and forth in the attic, I noticed I smelled gas really strong. And you know, I used to do plumbing for years, growing up with a family of plumbers. So I got Trace to get me a little bottle of soapy water and sprayed it on all of his pipes and connections up there. And sure enough, he had like 2 or 3 good strong gas leaks up there, right next to the sparking wire in the corner of the attic. So, you know, I tightened them up for him, got them to stop, and repaired the problem with the wire.
They were able to insulate that section of wire and then insulate the hole in the brace. And they thought they had found the problem and corrected it, but after the electrician had left, the breaker tripped again.
So I came back again, and this time I figured there has to be an intermittent problem hidden in the walls.
So I'll tell you what, I would just as soon you tear out the whole circuit and rewire it from the home run to that first switch, because we know the problem's in that line somewhere. Let's not try to find pinhole after pinhole. Let's put a new piece of wire in there.
We cut into the walls from the closet here and above the electric panel downstairs, and I was able to pop some of the staples, and I actually got to pull the whole wire out.
I could hear them. You won't even believe this.
They found that every 6 feet or so there was a damaged wire from pulling the wire through that hole that had been missed during the construction and the inspection of the home.
From upstairs, the wire going from the panel all the way up into the attic back down to the closet light switch. I started with ripping that out, and this is the wire that went down to the switch. It looked completely fine in the attic, except for the part right by that nail plate the electrician drilled through. That's where I found the first little nick there, and I realized that if he pulled it down to the panel instead of pulling it up, there was probably nicks all the way down to the panel. And sure enough, when we cut the walls open and pulled this wire out, we found some more nicks. We found this burnt, blown up spot, which is probably the worst point along the wire where all the intermittent shorting was happening. And past that, another nick, rip, and it basically kept going down the whole wire there.
You can see every pull that the other guy made. You know, there were shreds this long, there were exposed wires, and then he shows me where the wires had been completely exposed and had been burning together for some time.